Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Before we start with our today's analysis, a quick gentle reminder. As part of our knowledge series, some of the important static part will be discussed in our knowledge series. The future lectures would be with respect to these topics, which includes Article 20, Election Commission of India, Collegium System, UN reforms, Article 368, Amendment of Constitution, money laundering, Citizens Charter, BRAHMOS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, IUCN Red List, American Revolution, sea floor spreading. So please do tune in live on our YouTube channel every day at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says the 5-day work week might be fading away. This article here is speaking about the proposal to implement a 4-day work week as opposed to the current 5-day work week. If we look into the current scenario, there are people who are working in the IT companies. There are also people who are working in multiple other institutes as well. Let's say, for example, if there are people who are working for 6 days a week, they have to work for 8 hours every single day, and on a weekly basis they have to clock about 48 hours of work. If there are people who are working in IT companies or other biotech companies as well, they should be working for about 5 days, which means they have to log in for about 9 hours every single day, and the weekly should be about 45 hours. What is the proposal that is being made right now? As of now, we have this 6 days or the 5-day pattern, but in the near future, people will work only for 4 days. The rest 3 days in a week is where they would be enjoying the benefits of leave as well. But the payment that would be made for them will be complete as much as they are paid right now. It is in this particular backdrop, we will try and understand what are the advantages of the 4-day work week. We will also look at challenges with respect to its execution and the way forward. First up, we have to understand one of the experiments that was conducted in Japan. Recently, there was an experiment that was conducted where a trial run by Microsoft in Japan in 2019. According to it, the trial was conducted with a typical 8-hour workday for 4 days and a 3-day weekend, but a 5-day week paycheck. The minute this experiment was conducted, Microsoft realized that there was large-scale advantages when people were working only for the 4 days. What did Microsoft discover? They discovered that when people are working for 4 days in a week and they are paid the same amount that they are paid for 5 days a week, in that particular case, the productivity increased over a period of time. So Microsoft saw a 40% increase in the worker productivity. That is because they were satisfied with their job and they also felt that they were low burnout as well. As a result, the productivity increased because of this experiment that was conducted by Microsoft in Japan. Microsoft also saw higher efficiency as well. There was reduction in the office cost as well. There was also reduction in the number of printing papers as well, and as a result, it saw a massive 23% dip in the electricity cost and a 60% fall in the number of pages printed in the office. So overall, it saw the productivity increase if people are working only for 4 days in a week. The other 3 days is where they will be having the leaves on the weekend. This is one part. There was another experiment that was conducted in Perpetual Guardian, which happens to be a New Zealand trust management company, also reported a 20% increase in worker productivity after a similar trial in 2018. So this meant that over a period of time, consistently the productivity increased. So multiple experiments world over, one in Microsoft, the other in Perpetual Guardian, clearly points out that what we have is an advantage if people are made to work only for 4 days. So productivity increases. On the other side, companies would also be able to save on the cost as well. What are the other overall advantages? When you speak about the advantages, what happens? You have the people who have to commute to the office. So they have to leave their homes. They also have to reach their offices as well. As they commute, they take their cars. They also take their bikes as well, or they may also use the public transport as well. But they have to move from their homes to these offices. But now, since the number of days that they are working is comparatively reduced, 1 day is reduced, this commutation cost will also reduce for them. They would be able to make savings as well, and at the same time, if they are traveling, they have to make use of the fuel for their cars as well as for the bikes. Now this is also reduced, which means the environment issues will also be addressed. On one side, they will be able to do a cost cutting on their finances. On the other side, the environment, the greenhouse gases that is emitted through these cars and bikes will also be reduced as well. So this article currently goes on to say that there is an added advantage to this particular issue, that is because of all these advantages when it comes to the people working for 4 days. And there is also an advantage for the women as well. How is that it is going to be an advantage for the women? What it will increase is the gender parity. How it will increase the gender parity? As of now, when you look at people working in the IT sector or in any of the institutes, it is probably the men who are working more in comparison to the women. Why? Because when it comes to the women, they are asked to take care of their homes. They are asked to take care of their homes because there are none to take care of the children, or if there are old age parents as well, there would be none to take care of the old age parents as well. But in this particular backdrop, what would happen? You would now have the husbands or the male counterpart who will be available at their homes for about 3 days. So these people can also take part in their family activities. They can also take care of the care economics as well. This is where women would be able to explore their career progression. As of now, when you look at women, they actually work for minimal number of hours. Why? Because they have to take care of their children as well. And now, since you also have your husbands or the male counterparts who will also be there for the rest 3 days, they would be able to add up to it. Therefore, a 3 day weekend may push the men to take up more unpaid domestic work, which would give women more leeway, and they would be able to explore career progression as well. When it comes to the women right now, women often opt for smaller shift. They also have shorter work days as well, even if it is compromising the lower pay as well. But this means in the near future, they would be able to engage more in the career activities, and they would also have their dreams explored, because you would have men who would be staying at home for about 3 days. So with enough work-life balance in a 4 day week, women would also be able to focus more on the work, hence aiding their career prospects. This is the advantage with respect to the 4 day week. Does it mean that this can be equally applicable to all sectors? No. If you look at the service sector, yes, you would be able to implement the same in the service sector. But is it equally going to be present in the manufacturing sector? No. Let's take another example. Can this be implemented at the hospital premises where we do not have doctors? They would be only working for 12 hours a day and they would not be available for the next 3 days? No, it cannot be so. Or let's say, for example, you also have a barber as well, a hairdresser as well. Will he be able to work only for 4 days and take leave for the other 3 days? No. This basically means that you have disadvantages or the challenges when it comes to the 4 day work week. It is applicable only to a few sectors, but large number of institutes may still have to work efficiently for the other 5 days or the 6 days, so on and so forth. There was another experiment that was conducted by the Center for Policy Studies, United Kingdom, where public sector employees in the United Kingdom were asked to work for about 4 days. Did it give any advantage to the people? Yes, to a certain extent, it did give the advantage to the people. However, it is the government which started suffering. Why? Because people were made to work only for the 4 days. This they were not able to continue for the other 2 to 3 days, so they had to bring in more people to work as well. So the government started spending too much for whatever was happening in United Kingdom. So when we speak about this, it is not equally applicable both to the manufacturing and the service sector, or in fact the agriculture sector as well. But this is primarily for the service sector, where people who are working in the IT, BT, so on and so forth. These are the major challenges. Now when it comes to the pros and the cons, what are the advantages? Boosted employee motivation. So this person will have 3 days of off. He would be able able to explore what he wishes to. If he wants to have a passion, he can have his passion, he can continue with his hobbies and also learn new skill set as well. As of now, when you consider the 5 days, on the 6th day people would be tired, they would take the rest, and the next day they would also start partying, so on and so forth. If there is an additional extra day, they can also improvise on their skill set, and at the same time, the minute they report to their offices, productivity will also increase. So this will be a morale booster, motivation booster to all the employees. This will also help in cost cuttings. We did realize as well, with the experiment of Microsoft, the electricity bill comes down, the printing cost comes down, and at the same time they also provide tea, coffee, bread, so on and so forth. All this will also come down. This will also help the companies in saving of cost. Then there is less downtime, increased productivity, talent attraction and retention. More people would want to opt for such companies, they would want to work for such companies. There'll be more autonomy as well, and there are environmental benefits as we initially discussed. What are the challenges or the disadvantages? Inadequate coverage for customers and the co-workers. Let's say for example, because there are same number of people who have to work in a particular process and in a company, the other people who are working will have to manage, so more stress to this particular person. So let's say there are a team of about 10 people, so this is a team of 10 people, so there'll be many on offs as well. So this particular work will put additional burden on the people who are currently working, so there'll be more stress as well, there will be more burnouts as well, and they would not be able to manage, and as a result the productivity is not always that it may increase. Because of less people, the productivity may also drop. Scheduling conflicts will also be a problem. Reduced hours can mean reduced work. Compression may cost money as well. Added stress, as we just discussed, more work for others might not work for every kind of employee, which we did discuss as well. What is with respect to India? How is this going to work out? We have the government of India, which has come up with the labor codes. In all likelihood, the government of India is also speaking with the states as well, because labor happens to be a concurrent subject, and it is planning to come up with the rules. According to the rules, it has already proposed that if the IT companies so desire, they can go ahead with the 4-day work. This basically means that they would be able to work only for 4 days, but the next 3 days will be an off. When you consider the experiment that was conducted in Japan, what did it say? It said that they will still be working for 8 hours. But when it comes to India's proposal, it is not just 8 hours, but instead it is 12 hours. So they have to work for 4 days, which means they still have to clock about 48 hours in a week. Remember, when we spoke about 6 days a week, they had to clock about 48 hours. We also spoke about 5 days a week where they had to clock 45 hours. So even in this case, a proposal made by India means that they'll not be working for 8 or 9 hours, but instead they will be working for 12 hours to clock 48 hours in a week. This, the author says, may not be a motivation for the people who are working in India, as there'll be less productivity, there'll be burnouts as well, people will take a lot of stress, and this will not help the people as they will not be able to spend time with their family. So there are pros, there are cons to this particular issue, but if you're going to keep it for 12 hours for about 4 days, this may not work, as people will lose out on the interest with respect to the company, says this article. So the productivity declines after a certain number of hours. This is what the government of India has to take into picture, and if it implements the same, there will be resistance from the workers as well as from the companies itself, because the productivity may drop. So the author is requesting the government of India to reconsider this particular decision, and when the rules are drafted, it is also requesting that multi-stakeholder approach will have to be taken into picture. So this article currently goes on to say that all these multi-stakeholder approach will have to be taken into picture. So the employees will have to be considered, the employers will have to be considered, the civil society and the people who are engaged in work, they have to be considered, and the rules, since they are flexible, these inputs should be taken and only then implemented. And there is also the choice that is also given to the companies as well. So companies will also have to discuss the same with their employees and ultimately implement it, is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article says India's climate imperative. The article here is speaking about environment related concerns that India is facing and what are the measures that India will have to take in the near future. When it comes to India, we have multiple climate related issues. One, we have the heat waves, we also have the cyclones, we have the floods as well, we have sea erosion as well, we also have number of natural disasters. So this article currently points out for all these disasters that we have seen, what we have is two options. One is the resilience, the other one is to mitigate the environmental destruction. So this article points out how we can go ahead creating this impact. First up, when we look into India, India in the last few months witnessed a lot of heat wave. The heat wave that scorched Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat, New Delhi, so on and so forth. And at the same time, when you look at the statistics, heat waves in India have claimed an estimated 17,000 lives since the year 1970. Labor losses from the rising heat by one estimate could reach 1.6 lakh crore annually if global warming exceeds 2 degrees centigrade, with India among the hardest hit. If you look at the temperatures over the Indian Ocean have risen by over 1 degree since the 1950s, increasing extreme weather events as well. Added to it, there have been super cyclones like Cyclone Amphan, which has hit multiple states like Odisha and West Bengal. And what we have witnessed because of all this is because of the anthropogenic induced climate change. But there are people who say that this is the fury of the mother nature. This is not so, but instead it is to do with anthropogenic induced factors. In fact, when we look at the data from the world, India is the fourth worst hit when it comes to the climate migration as well. People have started moving internally and also from India to multiple other states because of the climate migration. In order to overcome all these issues, the author suggests that we have two approaches that we can look at. One, to adapt climate impacts by building resilience against weather extremes. Two, to mitigate environmental destruction to prevent climate change from becoming more lethal. So the first the author takes into picture is with respect to the climate resilience, where he brings into picture the prospects for the agriculture. When we speak about agriculture, if we have excessive heat wave, this is not good for the agriculture. Why? That is because there will be large scale drought like conditions in multiple places, and as a result the yield that is expected from agriculture will not meet the intended standards. And what are we doing off late? There is increasing deforestation as well. Added to it, there is land degradation in multiple states as well. This is further reducing the yield when it comes to the agriculture. So in order to make sure that we do not face the consequences of less yield, the author goes on to say that we may have to bring changes when it comes to the agriculture. So what are the changes that we may have to bring? As of now, there are some crops like the paddy which is very water intensive, so it requires lot of water. Yes, we need paddy, we need rice as well. So what we have to do is, in those areas where there's excessive water, we can make use of growing these crops. However, what we can also do is shift at other crops which are not water intensive. So provide the subsidies, provide all the incentives to the farmers so that they shift from paddy to other agriculture practices which is not water intensive. That's the first recommendation. The second says financial transfers can be targeted to help farmers plant trees and buy equipment, for example, for drip irrigation that reduces heavy water usage. So what should we do? As of now, farmers do not have much of the financial advantages. So if we are providing them financial incentives as well as transfers, they should be in a position to buy some of the equipment which will help in generating drip irrigation, so on and so forth. So this will help in saving of the cost for the electricity, and at the same time we will also be saving on the water. Insurance schemes can transfer some of the risk of extreme heat faced by industrial, construction and agriculture workers to the insurers. So insurance programs can be initiated for the farmers, and at the same time climate resilient agriculture calls for diversification, for example the cultivation of multiple crops on the same farm. So the author goes on to say there will be need for more localized food production. We need to have more crops that are produced in that particular locality. It is not just one crop but multiple crops which has to be grown in the same piece of plot so that the fertility is retained and the yield will increase over a period of time. Next, the author takes into picture floods as well as the sea erosion. If we speaks about flood, what we have is excessive flood, excessive rainfall, and it is the people who have become the major sufferers, especially during the monsoon season. Added to it, we should also speak about sea erosion as well. What is the sea erosion? Let's say for example, this is the sea. So what will happen? It will enter this particular area of land, but over a period of time, the sea waves and water has also entered those area where people were living. It is actually gobbling up this area as well, and the sea which was ending at this particular point has further increased. It has taken away the livelihood means and mechanisms by gobbling the land. It has eaten away the land. The land which was once available for the people is now being eaten. This is what is called as sea erosion. So in order to overcome this particular issue, the author goes on to say that we have to identify the flood areas, we have to identify those sea erosion areas and request the people not to construct houses in this area. So identify which these floodplains are, identify where the erosion extends up to in the near future, and make sure that you request the people to avoid construction in these locations. It is also vital to map the flood risk zones as well, and added to it, we have to create environmental impact assessments for all types of projects. The author also takes the example of Kerala, where Kerala has some flood resistant houses constructed on pillars. This can be used in multiple other states. Communities can build round shaped houses considering optimum aerodynamic orientation to reduce the strength of the winds. Roofs with multiple slopes can stand well in strong winds, and central shafts reduce wind pressure on the roof by sucking in air from outside. These are the measures that can be taken up by the people so that we would be able to make sure that the impact with respect to climate change is comparatively reduced. Added to it, we can also prevent the climate change as well. How? Leading emitters, let's say for example India is also become a leading emitter. The other countries like United States of America, European countries and China will also have to move away from the fossil fuels. The minute they move away from the fossil fuels, the greenhouse gases emitted by the cars as well as other vehicles will be comparatively reduced, so we would be able to reduce the impact of climate change. Meanwhile, a big part of the climate change lies in protecting and expanding the forest covered area. So in case the government has some plans to come up with developmental initiatives, this should not be at the cost of sustainability, and at the same time, wherever there is a forest, there has to be strict regulation, there has to be the institute monitoring it, and environmental impact assessment is a compulsory motive in such areas. Management of dams can aggravate glacier lake outbursts as well as floods. When you consider state like Uttarakhand, you have these huge large dams that are constructed. When these dams are constructed, these dams can also create the environmental disaster to that particular area. There are also dams that are constructed as well which are more than 100 years old. This will require repair, so constant monitoring and updation and evaluation has to be taken up. And at the same time, wherever there is ecologically fragile areas in such places, dams should not come, says this article. So dams, especially in the northern areas, in the areas of the Himalayan belt, it should be avoided, says the author. India's share in the disaster management should be raised to about 2.5% of the GDP. Climate finance is most suited for large scale global funding from the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the Asian Development Bank, but smaller scale financing can also be vital. The World Food Programme's funding for Nepal and Bhutan for community based adaptation and agriculture resilience for vulnerable community provides an interesting model as well. States can also tap into union governments' resources, financial and technological, from early meteorological systems to centrally sponsored climate schemes, so they can take the help of the central government, get the warning systems as well, so that they can mitigate the impact of climate related issues. And Mandrega funds can be used for climate adaptation in agriculture, waste management, as well as for the livelihood. States could make compulsory payment to local self-government resources being used for the climate adoption to ensure that all these are implemented. What we require is the political will. So the political will, the political masters will have to engage in such policy making. They have to take up this initiative, and only then we would be able to stop the menace of climate change related issues. So for the public pressure to drive climate action, we need to consider climate catastrophes not as the fury of Mother Nature, but instead it is us, it is we who induce this climate change. So we have to take up the responsibility and the onus, and only then we would be able to mitigate the impact of climate change, says this article. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says minority status in India is state dependent, says the Supreme Court of India. Before we understand what this article is, let's understand some of the basics with respect to Article 29 and Article 30. When we speak about Article 29, what does it say? It says protection of interests of the minorities. If we read Article 29, it says any section of the citizens residing in the territory of India or any part thereof having a distinct language, script or culture of its own shall have the right to conserve the same. No citizen shall be denied admission into any educational institution maintained by the state or receiving aid out of the state funds on grounds only of religion, race, caste, language or any of them. If you look into Article 29 of 1, it is for the section of the citizens. So it says it can be only for the section of the citizens. So it does not categorize who these section of the citizens are. But if you look into Article 30, it says it is minorities whether based on religion or language. When it comes to Article 29, it is for any section of the citizens. But when it comes to Article 30, it is for the minorities, and that is on the basis of religion and language only. So it is not any kind of minority, but it is only religion as well as language. So when we speak about Article 29, Article 29 basically speaks about two important sections. One, it speaks about any section of the citizens residing in the territory of India or any part thereof having a distinctive language, script or culture. It is only these three components on the basis of which they would be able to conserve. What are those? One is language, second is script, and third happens to be the culture. This is where we have to look at Article 29 of 2 and draw a comparison between Article 15 as well. How? When you look at Article 29 of 2, it says no citizen shall be denied admission into any educational institution maintained by the state or receiving aid out of the state funds on grounds only of religion, race, caste, language or any of the institution. Let's understand what is the difference between Article 15 of 1 and Article 29 of 2. When we speak about Article 15 of 1, it protects all citizens against discrimination by the state, but when it comes to Article 29 of 2, it protects against the state or even anybody else who denies the rights conferred under this article. So when it comes to Article 15 of 1, it is only the state, but when it comes to Article 29 of 2, it protects against state or anybody else as well. Now if you consider Article 15 of 1, it protects citizens against discrimination generally in all matters. But when it comes to Article 29 of 2, it provides protection only to a species of wrong, namely once a person is denied admission into state aided or maintained educational institutions. So remember, when it comes to Article 15 of 2, it generally bars discrimination in all matters. But when it comes to 29 of 2, it is only with respect to the education. And now if you look at Article 15 of 1, look at these words carefully. We have religion, race, caste, sex or place of birth. But when you look into 29 of 2, what you have is religion, which is common. Yes, race is also common, caste is also common, but sex or place of birth is not present in 29 of 2. What we have is a new criteria, language in place of sex or place of birth. These are some of the differences between Article 29 as well as Article 15 of 1. Now let's look at Article 30. Article 30 says rights of minorities to establish and administer. And if you look at 30 of 1, it says all minorities whether based on religion or language. So it can be a religion based minority or it can be a language based minority. It is not saying and here, it is saying religion or language. It need not be both. So in a specific state, if there are linguistic minorities, or they can also be religious minorities as well, it need not necessarily be both in the present situation. And look at this word as well. It says establish and administer. So there is and in this particular picture, which has to be used in conjunction. What does this mean? This means that if there is an institute which has been established by somebody else or via a statutory provision, but it is now being administered by the minorities, they cannot stake claim under this article. So this basically means if there is a management institution, they have to establish and administer. If somebody else has established, they would have given the management to somebody else who can be a minority, so they cannot take claim under Article 30. So if an institution has to take claim under Article 30, they have to establish, that is, they have to start this institution, and at the same time they also have the power to administer it. So if somebody has started or it is passed by a statutory provision, in that case they would be able to administer, but they will not be able to take the claim of Article 30. Now if you look into SP Mittal versus the Union of India, the Supreme Court has clearly stated that it is the religious and the linguistic minority which has to be proved in the first situation. So if you have to take the benefits of Article 30, prove that you are linguistic minority or a religious minority. Once that is proved, you would be able to get all the entitlements, and at the same time that institute should be established by the minorities. It should not be passed by the statutory provision. It should not be established by someone else. So if you are able to prove that you only created, if you are able to prove that you are a religious or a linguistic minority in that particular state, in that case you would be able to get the entitlements of Article 30. Another important pointer from the examination point of view is Constitution uses the term minority, but it has not defined it. So you may have a preliminary question which says that Constitution has defined minority. No, it has not defined minority, but instead it has used it in the Constitution but has not defined it. Now the question is, if the Constitution has not defined, who has the power to declare a particular community as the minority? So if we look into section 2C of the National Minorities Commission Act of 1992, this power is given to the central government, where they would be able to declare one of the religious communities as minority. If we look into the data, as of now, we have the Muslims, the Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists and Parsis, and in the year 2014 we also had the Jains who were given this particular tag as well. What is the question that is right now in front of the Supreme Court of India? When you look at the Supreme Court of India, there was a petition that was filed in the Supreme Court of India. Yes, at the national level we have these six, that is the Muslims, the Christians, the Sikhs, Buddhists, Parsis and Jains, who are called the religious minority. But when it comes to the state level, let's say for example, if we are taking Nagaland or Meghalaya or Jammu or Kashmir or any other union territory as well, we are not having Hindus as the majority. So in this particular case, what we have to declare is Hindus as the minority in that particular state. So the Supreme Court of India has once again clarified, it has once again reiterated that it is a well settled position that religious and linguistic minority status of that particular community will be decided state-wise on the basis of the state population, and it would be a travesty of justice that if a Christian who is a majority in Mizoram and Nagaland are given minority status in Mizoram, and at the same time if Sikhs are treated as minority community in Punjab, that will be travesty of justice. So this will be on the basis of state, is the clarification given by the Supreme Court of India. So the Supreme Court of India looked into the TMA Pai case, and it had also looked into DAV College Batinda versus State of Punjab case, and it has clearly classified that if you're considering the religious or the linguistic minority, it is on the basis of state. Then we have another landmark judgment given by the Supreme Court of India in Bal Patil case. In the Bal Patil case, the Supreme Court has once again clarified the legal position. The legal position stands clarified that henceforth the unit for determining status of both linguistic and religious minorities would be state. If therefore the state has to be regarded as the unit for determining linguistic minority under Article 30, then with religious minority being on the same footing, it is in the state in relation to which the majority or minority states will be determined. The minority for the purpose of Article 30 cannot have different meanings depending on who is legislating it. Language being the basis for establishment of different states for the purpose of Article 30, a linguistic minority will have to be determined in relation to the state in which the educational institution is sought to be established. The position with regard to the religious minority is similar since both religious and linguistic minorities have been put on par in Article 30. So this clearly points out that linguistic and religious minorities are put on an equal footing. So it is the state on the basis of which you would be able to categorize whether that particular community is a minority or not. So the petition said that some of the states were not declaring the Hindus as the minority. So the Supreme Court has asked, give us the data and we will go ahead and clarify it further. So the Supreme Court has listed the case for hearing after 2 weeks. We will take up this article once again. Now let's look into the next article. This article says growth and welfare. The article here is speaking about the freebie culture. We have discussed about this article and the link for the same will be given in the description box, so kindly look into it. Next article says cart before the horse. This article here is speaking about the bail reforms we did discuss recently in our CNA as well, so you don't have to go through this article. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. The 4-day work week is a welcome step towards gender equality and women's career progression. Comment. Discuss the measures that India can take to combat climate change. Please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.